Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are tackling a fundamental concept, which is variables. Think of variables as containers for storing information. Just like you might label a box toys or books to know what's inside, in programming we use variables to give names to data. This makes our code much easier to read, understand, and manage. In JavaScript, there are three main keywords we use to declare variables. Those are const, let, and var. We are going to break down each one, understand the differences, and learn which one you should be using in your projects. So let's start with var. This is the original way to declare variables in JavaScript. It still works, but it is generally not recommended for modern JavaScript programming. So let's head over to VS Code and create some variables. So I'm in my code editor VS Code and I've created this example.js file. And now let's create some variables. So I'm creating a variable with the var keyword, and the variable is called my name, and let's give my name a value called John. Then we can console.log the my name variable, and we can then run the code. So I'm using code runner to run the code, so you can click this button or you can use the Control Alt N shortcut to run the code, and we'll see that the output is John. So with the var keyword we can redeclare the same variable. So let's give that same variable a different value. Let's call it table, and then if we were to console.log my name, you will see both values will be displayed, which we can see over there in the bottom of the terminal. While doing this might seem convenient, it can lead to unexpected bugs in larger programs where you might accidentally overwrite a variable that you didn't intend to. And then we can look at function scope, which is another aspect of the var keyword. So let's say we were to create a function called greet, and inside the function we created a variable called message. And then let's log out that message variable. We can call the function. Let's just comment this out for a moment. So there we can see when calling the function our variable is displayed. However, if we were to try to log the message variable directly, we would get an error. So if we try to log the message variable directly, it would result in an error. Which is this reference error message is not defined. Let's add some comments to this code and recap what are the various aspects of the var keyword. So to recap, we can create a variable with var, and this variable will have function scope, and the variable can be redeclared in the same scope. If we try to log a variable outside of the function scope, we would get an error since the variable is not defined outside the function. So when a variable is declared with var, it is function scoped or globally scoped, which means its scope is limited to the function it's declared in, or if declared outside any function, it is global. The main issue with var is its hoisting behavior and its lack of block scope. So what is block scope? If we had a block of code, we'll see that the variable is still displayed even though the variable is declared within this block of code, which means that var is not block scoped, it is only function scoped or globally scoped. So for now, don't worry too much about hoisting. So the main aspect to remember is that in modern JavaScript, we do not use the var keyword. So instead of var, let's move on to the preferred methods of creating variables in modern JavaScript. Now let's talk about let. This was introduced in ES6, which was a major update to JavaScript, and it addresses many of the issues with var. Let is your go-to for variables that you expect to change later in your code. So let's head back to VS Code and create some variables with let. So let's use let to create a variable called user age, and let's assign it a value of 30. And then let's console.log that user age variable. So there we see the variable 30 is then logged to the console. So with let we can reassign a variable, which is different from re-declaring a variable. So to reassign the variable, we give it a new value by referencing the variable name and then the new value. So let's log the new value to the console. There we see the new value over there now, which is now 31. So over here we have reassigned the user age variable to a new value. If we were to try to redeclare the user age variable, this would cause an error in our program. So if we were to run this code, we'll see an error. User age has already been declared. So the let variable does not allow redeclaring. However, reassigning is allowed. The let variable is also block scoped. So if we look at the similar example we had earlier, if we were to try and log this variable called num outside of the block scope, we will also get an error. Num is not defined. So num only exists within this block of code, which means we can only access it inside of the block, hence the name block scoped. So if we try to output this, we will see the value is displayed over there. So to recap, with let, you cannot redeclare the same variable in the same scope, and this is actually a good thing because it helps prevent accidental overwrites and makes your code more robust. Also, let has block scope. This means if you declare a let variable inside a block of code, like an if statement or a for loop, it's only accessible within that block. Once the block ends, the variable is essentially gone. This helps keep your variables localized and prevents them from interfering with other parts of your code. So let's go to the next keyword, which is const. Finally, we have const. This stands for constant, and it's used for variables whose values are not meant to change after they've been assigned. So let's check out how to create them in VS Code. So we create a variable using the const keyword. And here we have the value logged out over there. So let's try to reassign the const variable. So if we try to console.log again, we will see that there is an error that will be displayed. Type error assignment to constant variable. So this shows us that it's not possible to reassign a constant variable. Another aspect of const is that you must assign a value when declaring a variable with const. We can see that VS Code immediately tells us that const declarations must be initialized. In other words, they must be given a value. So to recap, the key rule for const is you must initialize it with a value when you declare it, and you cannot reassign that value later. If you try, JavaScript will throw an error. So why use const? It makes your code more predictable and easier to reason about. If you see const next to a variable, you immediately know its value won't change. This helps prevent bugs and makes your code more maintainable. Here's a common point of confusion for beginners. What happens when you use const with arrays and objects? Many people think const makes the contents of an array or object immutable, but that's not quite right. Let's look at some coding examples. When you declare an array or an object with const, you are saying that the variable itself cannot be reassigned to point to a different array or object in memory. However, the contents of the array or object can still be modified. So we can add more elements to this array. If we use the push method, we can add another color, let's say yellow. And if we then view the updated array, update that spelling there. Let's maybe just comment out this console.log. So now we will see an updated array that includes the yellow string over there. So even though the array is declared with const, we can still add values to the array, and similarly we can remove values from the array. So we use pop to then remove the last element in the array. And let's view the new array. So there we were able to then remove yellow again and display the updated array. So what this shows us that even though we have declared the array with const, we can still add elements, remove elements. Similarly with an object. The only thing that we can't do when declaring an array with const is we cannot assign or redeclare the array. So we cannot now say colors equals to a new string. When we do this, it will throw an error, and we can check that out. Type error, assignment to constant variable. So this provides a form of safety in the code, as you cannot accidentally reassign your array to another data type. Similarly with an object. Over here we have this object called person, and we can log it to the console. And over there we see the object. Although the object is created with const, we can still modify properties of the object. For example, we set person.age equals 31, and then person.city equals Cape Town, and we then log the person object again. We will see the updated person object with the new properties or new values added. So even though we've declared the object with const, we can still update the properties as well as add additional properties. However, we cannot reassign the object to a different data type, or we cannot reassign the object at all, as a matter of fact. So if we were to say and let's add an age property, give it a value of, so if we try to log this, we would then get an error message. Assignment to constant variable. So we cannot reassign a variable declared with const, and we cannot also redeclare the variable. So we cannot reassign a variable declared with const. We also cannot redeclare the variable when it has been declared with const. And you see we'll get this person has already been declared error. This is incredibly useful. By using const for arrays and objects, you ensure that you're always working with the same array or object instance throughout your code, preventing accidental reassignment while still allowing you to manipulate its data. The following are some general rules when creating variables in JavaScript. Variable names are case sensitive. Over here we have 3 different variables. All the variables are called num, but the first one is lowercase, uppercase, and then capitalized with the first letter being uppercase. So in JavaScript, these are completely different variables, even though they are all called num. So remember that variables in JavaScript are case sensitive. JavaScript keywords should not be used for variable names. These are some of the keywords or reserved words in JavaScript which should not be used for variable names at all. A good practice is that your variable names should be descriptive and use camel case. Creating descriptive variable names in JavaScript involves using clear, concise names that accurately convey the purpose and content of the variable. This variable is an example of a descriptive variable name, as it will contain the customer's name and it's written using camel case, so it starts with a lowercase letter and every other word will start with an uppercase letter. Another example of a Boolean variable This is another example of a variable written in camel case, and it is descriptive because it is a Boolean variable that will be used to determine if the user is logged in or not.